Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast with me, Andrew Musgrove, and
And me, Sam Mulliner.
that's his name. Didn't seem too sure. Welcome to the second episode of Get in the Bin, the new mini weekly series from the Everything is Black and White podcast, the Newcastle United show. The concept is very simple. Every week, Sam and I will bring one item to the table that we'd like to see get in the bin. It will be from the game of football. It won't necessarily always be Newcastle United related. And then going forward, we'll have certain topics from where or which we have picked from last week, the debut episode. So Sam hit out at the lack of loyalty from sporting directors due to a certain Mr. Dan Ashworth. And my gripe was the fact that the free-to-wear coverage of the FA Cup is going to be drastically reduced after TNT announced they'd won the right to air the competition from 2025-2026. And the winner was Sam.
You.
And you can tell he's very happy about it indeed. Yes,
I'm winning this week, though. I have got a belter.
He's very confident. I got my item at the lack of or the reduction of free-to-air coverage of the FA Cup in the bin, while Sam just spent last week's episode being bitter about Dan Ashworth, who, by the time you listen to this, may or may not now be in his role at Manchester United, or more likely, he'll just be tending to his garden. Right, Sam, this week's episode, what are you going with? You've got 2 minutes to introduce your topic, and then I'll introduce mine. So your 2 minutes starts now.
The 6-second rule. Now, for those who aren't aware, goalkeepers are only allowed to handle the ball for 6 seconds. Is this enforced? No, not really. And it made me think back to the Bournemouth game the other week where Neto really should have. I mean, it was a weak refereeing performance, to say the least, but how Neto did not get at least cautioned is absolutely beyond me. Either enforce it or change the rule, but it needs to be scrapped. It's not fit for purpose. It's a bizarre rule. And yeah, the referees need to either be stricter in the enforcement of it, or it needs to go to 10 seconds or something a bit more realistic, because it's a law in football which is pretty pathetic, to be honest.
Okay, right. Well, if we start hitting out at everything that's not fit for purpose when it comes to football, we're going to have a very long episode.
Don't poo-poo my point straight away, because
no, I'm not. I'm not. I'm making a more general point that there's a lot that isn't fit for purpose in the world of football.
Neto was being an absolute D the other week, and I was front row of the Gallagher, and he was. I mean, I was with my 6, now 7-year-old son, so I was holding back on some language that I would ordinarily use were I not with child, and it was just taking the absolute mick, and the referee. I mean, that referee in particular should not be the Premier League official, but that's for another day. Incredibly weak performance. Didn't get hold of the game, and Neto was just allowed the freedom to time waste pretty much for about half an hour onward.
Yeah, he was quite. I'm not going to say clever at it. He was quite persistent with it, but we'll get onto that in a moment. I can see you're very passionate about it, which is going to set us up for a good show. My point this week, Sam, is the officials not raising the flag for an offside until the end of that section of play. That, for me, should get in the bin. It winds me up no end. Just raise the flag. Someone's going to get injured. Someone has been injured. It is an utter pointless rule that was introduced, I think, 2 years ago. The wait and see technique. Just
A bit
raise
longer than that. It's been a bit longer than that, but I will say this to you, and I'll ruin your point within 5 minutes of the whole episode with 4 words: Shelby versus Sheffield United.
Yeah, but there's yes, point. But
so join us next week, where it is now 1-1, and we'll be back with 2 more hot topics.
No, whoa, right. This is not an easy win for you. Don't you worry about that. I get the Shelby point. Fantastic. Switched on. You all had the conversation about it, but
I can do another 4 words: Joe Linton versus West Ham.
God, you've got it in the bag this week, haven't you? That's what you're thinking. It's not a consistent thing, though, is it? Like, not everyone plays to the whistle, and it just doesn't seem like the players on the pitch kind of are fully bought into that, and they also don't get the opportunity to, because even though the flag's not raised straight away, when it is raised, sometimes the actual play hasn't come to an end, which I think kind of poo-poos the point you were making. But we'll come back on to my point about not raising the flag for an offside or an offence until the end of that play. Let's go back to your point in the 6-second rule, because I was actually pleasantly surprised, because I thought you were going to complain about players not being punished for not sticking to it, which is part of your gripe, but you're actually also saying it's an unrealistic rule.
Do you know what? I don't think it is part of my gripe, because I have no issue at all with keepers trying to time waste and like the housery element. We did it lots last season, but my point is, we did it lots last season and we picked up a lot of yellow cards doing it. Whereas it's not always followed through consistently from weak referees in particular. Whether they're a bit, I mean, it kind of ties into your point as well. Maybe a bit complacency now that VAR is in place, and they're a bit too scared to make a proper decision. You see that in the FA Cup, where in grounds where there's no VAR, and the game does flow better. But if a goalkeeper is going to really take the mick out of a situation like Neto was doing in particular the other week, then there has to be some kind of punishment for that, whether it be indirect free kick. Do I remember at youth level, when like 20 years ago when I played, where it was quite strict in my league. I would literally, because I was a goalkeeper, I would save it, run to the edge of my box and kick it out. And sometimes I'd get penalised for the 6-second rule just by doing that. Making a save, running to the end of the box and distributing it out. And then it all just seems to kind of get forgotten about. And there's just no punishment for it. And keepers are allowed to run down the clock. They'll wait for everyone to get out, still holding the ball. You know, I might just have a little bounce of it now. Well, nothing's really on. I'll just have a little bounce of it again. 30 seconds have now gone by, and the keeper's still holding it, and then he eventually puts it down and kicks it off the floor. That's not what the law of the game is, I'm afraid, and it's whether you want to call it game management or housery or this, that, and the other. Either the rule needs to be adjusted for the modern game, or it needs to be enforced properly.
Well, that's probably a more general point, isn't it? There's a lack of consistency when it comes to officiating. There's a lack of competency when it comes to officials, and I don't know how you solve that, because the
You either
rule.
enforce it and then it gets stopped. Because if a keeper's holding on to the ball and he's 7 yards out from his goal, he then concedes an indirect free kick.
So are we saying maybe have
Like
a big screen and a countdown? 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then when it gets to 0, if he hasn't kicked it, if he hasn't chucked it out,
He
the
gets
referee's got no
tasered.
Bit extreme.
No, it is a bit. It's a bit American as well. I think that whole countdown scenario. I know referees aren't having the greatest time at the moment, but I'm pretty sure they can internally count to 6.
But I wonder why, though. Why do you think it isn't enforced at the moment? Because it's a very simple rule. Surely you look at your watch, you count 6 seconds, and if it hits 6 and he hasn't gotten rid of it, he gets booked.
I mean, you don't even need to look at your watch to count to 6.
Granted, but for the sticklers who will question that the referee maybe has gone 1 second too early.
I suppose the argument is the flow of the game, which is why players are allowed to steal a couple of yards from throw-ins and free kicks and this, that, and the other. Although, to combat Neto, did you see Anthony Gordon in the second half? That was it, because it was right in front of me.
He still
Yeah.
moved it forward, though. Once the referee put it down where where it should have been, he still moved it forward.
Yeah, so you could argue there's a common sense element to it. However, what I would say to that is the common sense element of it, you shouldn't be allowed to take the P if you're then taking nearly 1 minute to take a goal kick or to get the ball distributed after making a save. It's that the flow of the game argument then does go out the window, because you're essentially just running down the clock, which is what Neto was looking to do very early on, considering that Bournemouth were well in the game in the first half. Some would say they had the better of it, which they did. So I find it really odd what he
Have
in
we ever
particular.
seen a keeper sent off or 2 yellow cards for that offence, for holding on to the ball?
So time wasting is a bookable offence. The 6-second rule isn't a bookable offence. It's like offside.
Right, so there's the other thing then. See, I always thought if you held on for 6
So
seconds.
my 2004 refereeing course degree is finally paying off.
So that maybe adds another part of your gripe then. Then should the 6-second rule become punishable by a yellow card?
So you're going to say death then?
I'll stick with a taser in, thanks.
Yeah. No.
But surely, if it, sorry, I mean, I'll take your refereeing knowledge at first hand, but surely if you're holding on to the ball for 6 seconds and the rule is it has to be, distributed within 6 seconds, that is time wasting, right? Because you're not.
I would say not, because 6
But
seconds can go
you're
quite quickly.
delaying.
Yeah, but the punishment is indirect free kick, which is for that, whereas your punishment for what is time wasting or unsporting behaviour, which is what it will come down to, it'll be classified as unsporting behaviour, not time wasting. The punishment is just a caution, not a free kick to the opposition. You're still then allowed to take your goal kick or whatever, aren't you?
True. Right. So I've gone back and I found the good old rules. Laws. July 1997, FIFA also established that if a goalkeeper holds the ball for more than 5 or 6 seconds, the referee must judge this as time wasting and award an indirect free kick to the opposing team. Although in practice, the 6-second rule is rarely enforced on a literal 6-second count from the moment they control the ball, as written in the laws, and instead, when enforced, it is often after a longer time frame involving the goalkeeper faking throws, kicks, or running around the penalty area.
So you have visions of Jordan Pickford doing all of that.
But as you say, you go back to last year, Sam, and Newcastle were the experts at, and if you've got any little uns in the room and you listen to this podcast, this is your 6-second warning to the next word I'm going to use, because it is a rude word. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So no wasting time from me. They were the experts at shithousery, weren't they? And this was part of it. They would delay tactics, and we were all for it. As you said, it was part and parcel of what made Newcastle so great last season. So can we really hate on people doing it?
First of all, I didn't realise we were allowed to F and Jeff.
Well, I've got to give them warning.
Okay. Yeah, you've got to put the E on the podcast now.
But knowing you as well, Sam, if you get an inch, you'll take a mile. That's the issue. So I'm
a loose cannon. Yeah, like it just comes back to the flow of the game argument and common sense aspect. But the point is, like what we did last season, we got pulled up for it, and we then used that again to waste time. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. Like Liverpool at Anfield, which was just heartbreaking. I was in the away on that night, and still gives me nightmares. So yeah, you know, you pay your money, you take your choice when you employ them kind of tactics. The point is, we were penalised when we did it. Joe Linton, Pope, Cher, they all got plenty of cautions for unsporting behaviour will be the technical term, but time wasting is in essence what it was. So when you see Neto trying to confuse the poor ball girl behind the goal on Saturday, just so he can waste a minute, I just think you just a bit of a D head. That's all I can imagine, and that should have been, and it was down to poor officiating and weak officiating. That was down to, so
But it sounds like there needs to be a tweak to that rule, and you mentioned earlier in your point about maybe extending the time limit.
Well, this is why it needs to get in the bin, doesn't it? Because 6 seconds probably isn't long enough. You could probably increase it to 10, and it might work better then. It's just not. It's just one of these laws of the game that are just weird, and it's just no real kind of common sense about it at all. Really, it's not enforced. So what's the point of it being there? You may as well change it to make it an actual law that can be applied to every game.
Okay, I get you. It's funny you mentioned throw-ins and stuff, because you mentioned Neto and how that moment with Anthony Gordon moving the ball forward. That really frustrates me when they do it on the touchline. They try and get an extra, 5-10 yards, and the referee doesn't do anything about it. And I often think wildly, and I'm not being serious before anyone writes it, but I often think, when the ball goes out, is there no way like a powder bomb can explode or something, and it marks exactly where the ball went out, and then you have no chance of moving forward? That there's a nice purple mark on the touchline. That's where it went out. That's where you're standing.
Well, so you think linos should have the spray as well?
Yeah, but I mean, no linesman, and we'll get onto them in a second. They'll be spraying not the right position. I don't know. Like when in the American movies when they steal all the money and then all of a sudden there's a big explosion of purple ink in the bag. Somehow can we replicate that and put that onto the touchline when the ball goes across? There's a little mark on the touchline. That's where it's gone out. I mean, it means
you're suggesting a lot of Americanized things that I'm not really a fan of. It like big time.
I'm not being 100% serious. I can see people now getting the pitchforks out and coming for us, but it is a massive frustration, and it goes back to your point, really, Sam. The serious point is that where's the enforcement? Where's the enforcement on the 6-second rule? Where's the enforcement on where the ball goes out? And allowing them to get even just 5 yards, it can make all the difference. It seems daft to some, but actually can make all the difference. That's the general, the overarching point, isn't it? The lack of just punishing wrongdoing in the game.
Yeah, well, just enforcing the laws of the game. That's all. Like every other law is enforced. The whole law in itself is not fit for purpose, so that's why it needs to get in the bin. It shouldn't be 6 seconds in the first place. It does tie in nicely to time wasting, but the difference is, arguably, instead of taking a booking, which then could lead to a match suspension or whatever, but an indirect free kick from 6 yards out or whatever, you think back to like in essence, it's the same as a pass back. You think back to Shearer versus West Brom, and the women's team had one against Burnley the other week. I took the whole family to the women's game away at Burnley last Sunday, and Burnley made a pass back, and the referee enforced it. I mean, fair play to the ref, because like the whole of the crowd, because it's again one of them that isn't really enforced to the harshness that it really could be. There's a lot left to interpretation with pass backs and how deliberate, what do you call a pass or what do you call a deflection? It's one of them where, holding on to the ball for too long could then cost you a goal.
Yeah. Grand, right. I'm going to go with my point now, and it's the not raising the flag for an offside. I just think someone's going to get hurt, someone's going to get injured. It's utterly pointless letting them run on through, especially for the decisions in which they are offside. I can understand to a degree the more narrow ones, maybe they're not sure, but then that begs the question: are they relying on VAR to make sure, which isn't necessarily a great thing. You know, we want linesmen to be confident and ensured that they're right. You know, that they know what they're doing, that they're confident in calling the right decision. And you mentioned earlier in the show, it is a breath of fresh air when you're watching Championship games or the FA Cup games, and the game is flowing, and the linesmen are trusting their instinct, and they're getting it right more often than not. And it is something that I really enjoy seeing. I just think they should scrap this rule, because for every one or two instances where someone plays on and they end up getting a goal, that in itself is a bit meh, because, you know, the opposition have stopped or what have you, and okay, someone's tapped the ball in the back of the net, but it's still a bit, you know. And just to reaffirm, we saw Edison. Was it against Newcastle? Actually, was it Wilson? He's out? Someone ran through, didn't they? And clobbered Edison, I think, and it turned out the player was offside. And it's those sort of moments where you think, what's the point? What's the point? Just raise the flag and call it offside.
But
Because
where's your cut-off point, though? Because I'm all for it, because there are, like, in some aspects, because there are some really obvious ones that you just think, well, why haven't you stuck your flag there? It was obvious, it was 2 yards off. But where's your cut-off point at the grey area, where lino, you know, you've got a split second to make a call, knowing you've got the benefit of VAR in the back of your head. Why wouldn't you see how it develops?
I think you just get rid of it, though. I think that's one of the rules. I just say just scrap it and just trust your instinct.
So then Steve Bruce's Newcastle are struggling to hold on to a 1-0 lead at Bramall Lane when Sheffield United were actually good-ish. You know, Newcastle don't get that second goal against West Ham that Joe Linton scored. Up until then, it was actually, I know it finished 5-1 in the end, and I was there that night, and it was just an utter joyous hour and a half.
But these are two examples. But these are just two examples in a host of instances where the rest of it's just been a total waste of time.
Because I'm making it relevant to the audience, Andrew.
Well, I get your point. But I don't know. It doesn't persuade me that this is a good thing. I mean, do you think it's a good thing them not raising the flag for an offside?
I think there is a grey area and a cut-off point where they need to raise their flag. Like there's some proper obvious ones where you should just raise your flag, because it's obvious, it's stupid that you don't, and maybe officials in that aspect have become overly reliant on VAR and, you know, getting the lines out on the computer screen. There's a grey area, and then there's an aspect where it works really, really well, because you've let play go on. They've tucked the ball in the net, but you can flag after. On-field decision is offside, but then you can go and check it on VAR. And, you know, although it can take a bit of time, the right decision 9 times out of 10 is usually reached.
You know, I don't know. It just annoys us when you see someone running through, and it is probably more the more obvious ones. And all of a sudden, the flag goes up, and then you look back and you think, yeah, he was miles offside. What is the point? And it's not as if you can introduce even more like another element of the rule which is open to interpretation. This grey area you're talking about. It's not like you can say, right, you know, you can stick your flag in the air if you definitely think it's offside. If you're not too sure, just delay it, because then that again is just going to open a whole kind of worms. It needs to be one or the other, doesn't it?
I think both of our kind of topics can just be put under the umbrella of weak officiating.
And not having a belief in VAR, for me, it's do you fully trust VAR to get the decisions right? I mean, like you say, with
I trust the technology.
Yeah,
I trust the technology.
Yeah.
I don't trust the guys using it.
Yeah,
that's the main issue, isn't it? I know the guy, the name of which escapes me, I apologise, who trains the VAR officials is leaving, and he's going to rugby league. So maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. Time will tell.
Rugby I don't know which form of rugby, but rugby do it really well, don't they? Like
rugby league, he's going to. Rugby union do it fantastically well.
That's where football needs to take a page out of the book and follow.
Well, that was always the argument, wasn't it, of when the technology was introduced. Look at rugby and how rugby players treat the officials.
Technology's there, as we say. It's just the players, the people running it.
Yeah.
But I would just like to see officials, especially linesmen, and it does also apply to referees, but I just like to see them have a bit more confidence in their decisions, in their instincts, and it goes down to this rule about not raising your flag. I think it just risks people getting injured, and you might as well just put the flag up. You know, people. I think with all the changes of late, I think stripping back that rule of delaying the flag is one, and people listening and watching, you can tell me I'm wrong, get in the comments, let me know. But I think it's if that rule was suddenly gone and disappeared and changed back to how it was, I think it's probably the rule that people would accept the most reversed. Do you get what I mean? I don't think people would be too fussed about. I don't think people would be kicking off. Oh wait, you can't scrap that rule. I'd be wrong. Would you be fussed if you woke up tomorrow and the FA said, "Actually, guess, lads and lasses, we're getting rid of it. We're just going to rely on the instinct now of the linesman."
I think it's gonna cost more goals than you think.
Okay.
Whereas you could say if the 6 second or whatever, however many seconds you want to give, because the whole rule's stupid, which is why it needs to get in the bin. If for example, let's continue with the Neto kind of scenario, were he in the second half when he's faffing around trying to confuse the poor ball girl, he then concedes an indirect free kick 6 yards out when the game is 2-2, and you know there's 3 minutes of the 10 added minutes left to play. Newcastle get a free kick 6 yards out with Fabian Schär's traction engine of a right foot primed, or Matt Ritchie's wand of a left foot primed to win the game. You know,
Right.
I think that makes for a more appealing change rather than your one, which is just costing goals to the game.
Okay. Well, we're going to come on to the end now, and this is where you will have your 30 seconds or so to make one final plea to me and our listeners and viewers to back your call to put the 6-second rule in the bin. And the way this will work every week, ladies and gents, is that if me and Sam cannot agree, we will open it up to the floor. We'll run a little poll, and you guys will have the deciding vote. If one of us can be persuaded to join the other, as last week Sam was persuaded to join me, you guys can still get involved. You can still argue with us and tell us we were totally wrong. We love when you do that. Sam, 30 seconds, persuade me that the 6-second rule needs to be in the bin.
The 6-second rule is a pointless law that is not fit for purpose in the modern game. It needs to be altered or enforced, and you could cut down time wasting and the S-housery of teams and enforce. It could result in more goals with indirect free kicks, or it could completely cut out silly goalkeepers who just want to waste time and get involved with crowd antics. Either way, it needs to get in the bin because it is not fit for purpose.
Last week you spoke about how passionate I was about my point about the FA Cup, and you said this week you'd be a bit more passionate. Was that your passionate, top level passionate? Was that the bar set there?
Considering I'm ill, yes.
Okay. I'm not doubting it. It was rather passionate. My 30 seconds begins now. Scrap this ridiculous rule of not raising the flag for an offside until the end of the passage of play. Someone's going to get injured. It's not worth the risk. Okay, you have 1 or 2 instances where players have played on and put the ball in the back of the net, and it's easy to hold them up because this is a Newcastle United podcast, and Newcastle United are probably the prime example of doing so. But overarching, it is a stupid rule. It doesn't really add anything to the game. As I said, someone's going to get injured and probably quite serious at some point. It actually disrupts the flow of the game when you have to stick the flag up. They could have stopped it and the game could have resumed a lot sooner. And yeah, I think we need to see linesmen be more confident in themselves, that they're getting the decision right. Use that instinct. Go back to how it was. Okay, you might get a few wrong, but it's always nice to watch games where there's no VAR They're not relying on it, and they're just getting it right. Scrap it, get rid of it. Come
So
on.
you were disgusted when Fabian Schär looped that diagonal to Joe Linton, who tucked it away past Fabianski to make it 2-0. You were disgusted with that.
No, I wasn't. And I just explained it's easy to hold that up because we're Newcastle fans and we benefited from it. But I think looking at it in a general sense, that there are two examples, and the Shelby one being another, but it's unbalanced. There's more bad than good with this rule, in my view. But I don't think I've persuaded you. So now it's going to rely on me to come over to your side, right? That's what's going to have to happen here. Or we open it up to the floor.
Well, you can
I
do the
am
right
going to
thing.
actually. Huh?
You can do the right thing, which is to come over because you know I'm right.
I am very passionate about this flag issue, and I do think it deserves to be scrapped. However, the 6-second rule, on the basis of it being enforced, I am agreeing with you. It needs to be enforced.
Yeah.
Does it need to be extended to 10 seconds? Potentially, I'm not too sure. I think if you started enforcing it on 6 seconds, and I know we joked about having a big screen and a big countdown, but hey, it would stop them messing about, wouldn't it? If you knew you actually
like a shot
being
clock in
counted.
snooker, just to kind of make it a little less American. The shot clock in like the snooker shootout or whatever. Yeah, that's There's potential for that, but it's just I'm glad you've done the right thing and seen the light because it was just better than yours in every single way, shape, and form.
Mate, last week you were personal and bitter towards Ashworth. This week, bitter and personal towards me. What is going on?
I'm still ill.
Still ill. All right. Well, that's an easy excuse. Next week, you might be in a better mood, ladies and gents. But yes, this has been episode 2 of Get in the Bin. And this week's winner is Sam Mulliner, who persuaded me, Andrew Musgrove, to back his point that the 6-second rule needs to get in the bin. You can get in touch with me and Sam on social media. We've also got the Everything is Black and White podcast email, where I'd love you guys to get in touch. Drop me an email with any topics you want me and Sam to cover in this mini series, because going forward, we are going to look at specific areas of the game. So, i.e., Newcastle United. Is there a topic each regarding Newcastle United that we'd like to get rid of, etc., etc. The email is theeibwpodcast@reachplc.com. And I'll check out what you guys send in. But thank you very much for tuning in. It's been a pleasure. This has been Get in the Bin, episode 2. And from me and Sam Mulliner, we'll see you guys very soon.